Okay, so picture this. You glance in the mirror, maybe, I don't know, after a big life change, like maybe significant weight loss. Could be anything, really.
Hmm.
And just for a second, that person looking back, it feels a bit off.
Yeah.
Like, you know it's you, but it's also kind of not. There's this weird unfamiliarity.
Right, that gap.
Exactly. That feeling where the outside changes, but the inside hasn't quite caught up. That's what we're diving into today.
We've got some really interesting material to work with.
Yeah, two pieces. One is entry, #2. The morning her reflection didn't recognize her from field notes from the quiet window.
Okay.
And the other is emotional hunger, what Dan Hollis taught me about emotional hunger.
Dan Hollis, yeah, his ideas are central here.
Totally. So our mission basically is to explore that feeling, that disconnect after a major change, and look at a way to handle it using Hollis's insights.
And it's fascinating how both sources, maybe from slightly different angles,
Yeah.
really touch on this
Yeah.
this delay, right, between the external transformation and our internal sense of self kind of recalibrating.
Yeah.
It's not just about the physical stuff, is it? It's deeper. It's about how we see ourselves, our own story.
Right. And that lag happens because, well, our brains and how we see ourselves, they're built up over time, right? Through everyday experience.
Exactly. So a quick physical change doesn't just like instantly rewrite all those ingrained thoughts and feelings. It takes time.
Okay, so the first piece, it gives us Adrienne's story. She's 53, just, brushing her teeth, totally normal morning.
Everyday moment.
Then she looks up and bam, the woman in the mirror feels like a stranger. Thinner face, different eyes.
Wow.
And it wasn't like, yay, look at me. It was more unsettling. She told Dan, I knew it was me, but I didn't feel like I belonged to her.
Oof. That phrase, didn't feel like I belonged to her, that really captures it, doesn't it? That disconnect.
Yeah.
It's like our self-image isn't just visual. It's all tangled up with our memories, our experiences, our whole internal narrative.
And that brings us right to Dan Hollis's idea of identity lag. He puts it really simply. Your body can change faster than your story. And when that happens, the soul gets confused. So let's unpack that idea of story. It's like our personal narrative, who we think we are.
Exactly. It's the script we've written for ourselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes, yeah, the physical reality changes, but the script hasn't been updated yet. There's a lag.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And think about how much of that script is tied to just how we exist physically, how we move, how people react to us, how we navigate a room.
Right.
So when that physical self shifts dramatically, it naturally disrupts the old story, leaves you feeling kind of out of sync.
What really got me about Adrienne's account was this sense of mourning.
Mourning, yeah. But not for the lost weight itself.
No, exactly. It was for the version of herself who carried that weight, the one who knew how to operate in the world as that person.
Oh, okay.
Like the article says she had these specific strategies, using humor to manage a room, knowing which clothes felt safe or concealing, even how to apologize casually.
She was skilled at being that Adrienne.
Yeah, she knew that role inside out.
That's a really key point. What happens when those coping mechanisms, those strategies you've perfected, suddenly aren't needed anymore or don't fit?
Right.
If how you move through the world was tied to that old physical form and now the form is different, well, it makes sense you'd feel a bit lost, even if the change is good.
Mm-hmm. It's losing the familiar, losing a self you understood, and then what now? How do I do this?
Yeah, which actually connects really well to the second source, the one about emotional hunger.
It does. Dan Hollis again. He says emotional hunger isn't just about wanting food.
Right. He says it sounds like a craving, but it's actually a question, a need asking to be seen.
So not just a rumbling stomach. It could be you're tired or lonely or just completely overwhelmed.
And we reach for food, maybe, but the real hunger is for something else. Rest, connection, calm.
Totally.
And here's another interesting angle. Things that reduce physical hunger, like the article mentions semaglutide.
Yeah, the medication.
Right. Those can actually make the underlying emotional needs feel louder, more obvious.
Ah, because the physical noise is turned down?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dan Hollis says, when food stops being your emotional scaffolding, you don't just feel lighter, you feel exposed.
Exposed. Wow.
That familiar way of coping, using food for comfort or distraction, that fades. Well, the unmet emotional needs are suddenly right there, harder to ignore.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the article is clear. Semaglutide isn't some magic bullet for emotional eating.
No, not at all.
Dan says, semaglutide isn't the solution to emotional eating. It's the silence that lets you find one.
I love that, the silence that lets you find one. It quiets the biological static so you can finally hear what else is going on, what those emotional hungers are really about.
Mm-hmm.
And his whole approach to cravings is, well, it's different. Instead of seeing them as bad, like a failure,
Yeah, something to fight against.
right, he sees them as messengers, important signals. He encourages curiosity, asking, okay, what am I really hungry for right now?
Moving away from judging yourself and towards just asking, being curious.
It's a huge shift.
Yeah.
And it's fundamental if you actually want to understand and address that emotional hunger.
Which brings us back to Adrian's journey with Dan. He really focused on language, didn't he? Helping her reframe her internal chatter.
Yes, consciously. They actively rewrote the names of things.
I found this part fascinating. Like, shame wasn't shame anymore. It was reframed as memory.
Mm-hmm.
Control became curiosity. Discipline turned into alignment.
That renaming process,
Mm-hmm.
it's incredibly powerful. It changes your whole relationship with the experience.
How so?
Well, seeing shame as memory lets you acknowledge the past without letting it define your present, right?
Okay, yeah.
Shifting from control to curiosity opens things up. Instead of rigid rules, it's about exploring possibilities.
Less pressure.
Exactly. And discipline becoming alignment.
Yeah.
That sounds much more integrated, more harmonious, like your actions fitting your intentions, not forcing yourself.
Yeah, less like forcing, more like flowing. And another big piece for Adrienne was permission.
Permission is huge.
Giving herself permission to just not know everything right now, permission to feel awkward in this new skin, this new reality, and permission to build a new story without having to like completely trash the old one.
Absolutely. That integration is key. It's not about erasing your past self
Right.
and allowing yourself to just be in that awkward in-between space.
Yeah.
That's crucial. Change is an instant. There's always that adjustment period.
And the messy middle bit.
Yeah, the messy middle, where you're not quite who you were, but not yet who you're becoming. Accepting that, allowing the awkwardness, that's vital for adapting in a healthy way.
So the first piece, it ends with this really subtle but lovely image. Adrienne looking in the mirror again.
Yeah.
And she doesn't flinch away this time. She's not like forcing a smile or anything. She just stands there a little longer than before.
Yeah.
And Dan's comment is just, that is something.
Yes, that is something. It's not about some big dramatic breakthrough necessarily. It's those tiny shifts.
Yeah.
Those small moments of standing longer, of not flinching.
Mm-hmm.
That's the new relationship with self being built. Slowly, one moment of acceptance at a time.
Mm-hmm. Integrating, accepting.
Exactly.
So for anyone listening, if you've ever felt that kind of disconnect, you know, between the you inside and the you people see, or the you see in the mirror,
Yeah.
you're really not alone in that. It's part of the process. The article says it beautifully. You're just learning how to belong to yourself again.
Belong to yourself again. That's lovely. And it links back to that quiet window idea Dan Hollis mentions.
Right. The old drivers, the old ways of being, they start to fade.
And that creates space for something maybe more authentic to start growing.
Mm-hmm.
And that quiet period, that transition, it's actually really valuable. A time to listen maybe, to let that new sense of self emerge without forcing it.
Okay, so let's try and pull this together. The main thing we've looked at is this identity lag, as Dan Hollis calls it.
Right. When significant change happens, especially fast change, our inner self, our story, just hasn't kept pace with the outside reality.
Yeah, and that can leave you feeling like a bit of a stranger in your own skin, in your own life.
Mm-hmm. And that quote from Dan Hollis really sums it up. The weight loss is just the clearing. The becoming takes longer.
The clearing versus the becoming. I like that.
Yeah. And even though we talked about it with weight loss, that idea applies so much more broadly, doesn't it, to any big life shift?
Definitely. The initial change might be obvious, maybe even sudden, but the real work, the integrating, the becoming, that's a slower burn.
It's a process, ongoing.
So maybe a final thought for you listening. Think about what scaffolding in your own life might be shifting right now, or maybe even dissolving.
Good question.
And in that quiet space that's left, what deeper needs might be trying to get your attention? What's asking to be seen?
And the invitation is to approach that with curiosity.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Curiosity and self-compassion. Just allowing yourself that time and space for the becoming, it's all part of the journey.